Guys, if you're looking for style, comfort, and versatility, check out the latest collections from Versed. Whether you're hitting the gym or tackling your daily routine, Verst's wide selection of menswear blends proven performance with a functional and classical look. Their new fleece collections are designed with premium fabrics, the perfect layered style that keeps you feeling good and looking even better. Explore the latest from Verst for next-level comfort and elevated style. Available only at Dick's Sporting Goods. Shop now at dicks.com/first.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 275.
The ayes to the right, 330. The noes to the left, 275. The ayes have it, and look!
Welcome, Quiet Rioters, to Sunday School, the kitchen disco to our Thursday rave. Hallelujah. 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 I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Alexandro. How are you, Naomi?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex.
Been another busy week, hasn't it?
Getting busier post-recording the main show each week, it feels.
I know, right? So many news in the grid, as it were, the last few days. We definitely won't be able to talk about all of it.
No.
Like, we're looking, I think, for expert guests on things like what's going on in Georgia, what's going on in Romania, what's going on in Syria, etc. Although Syria will come into today's conversation a little bit, I think. But yeah, busy news time.
Very. And listeners, I need to remind you that you've got literal hours left to sign up in time to receive an invite to our Ask Us Anything online session. That's going to be happening on the 9th of December, but you really need to be signed up by tomorrow if you're listening to this on Sunday, in order to get the email invite for that. So head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod before tomorrow to get that link, which will be coming from producer Kenny to your email inbox over the coming days.
It's going to be fun. I mean, maybe you want to know how we met, or who would pick in a Snog, Marry, Avoid competition, or whether Kenny would choose a knighthood over a date with AOC. No question is off limits, though we retain the right not to answer them all.
So get signed up if you haven't already. Don't forget, if you can't, we get it. We totally understand. Don't worry. And we're still going to be pumping out lots of free content, particularly over the festive period, for you to hoover up when you just need some non-family company.
And you could, I mean, this is just a suggestion, we're going to give a few seconds to people who do want to sign to our Ko-Fi to do it now, because we know that works. And if you feel so inclined, you could use this time to give us a star rating and a review on whatever podcast app you use, because that really, really helps boost the algorithm as well. Now, Naomi, what shall we chat about? The assisted dying bill is impossible to ignore, I think, as a moment in our political life. And we have also seen the first Starmer cabinet resignation from Louise Haigh.
Yep, I'm very happy to talk about both of those, particularly because I did that standalone show on the assisted dying debate with Andrew Copson from Humanist UK. So really happy to go back now that the vote has taken place and revisit all of that. Further afield, though, I think we should probably have a quick chat about Zelensky and him making his NATO membership ask. Was it an ask? Was it a situation where he was sort of beginning to show a bit of ankle on suing for peace? Let's get into all of that. And of course, the Irish election has happened. So I think there's quite a lot for us to get stuck into, and we should probably just crack on. Quiet Riot.
The Commons sat in large numbers on Friday, with the assisted dying bill passing its second reading. The result was not as close as many had expected, with 330 voting aye to 275 against. Now, while this was an important indicator on whether this bill will pass, we must remember that there is a long road ahead with scrutiny at the Lords and committee stages next. The debate was sombre, well attended, carefully considered, and I think passionately, but with very few exceptions, argued really cordially and in good faith. I mean, in many ways, it was frustrating to see how the Commons as a legislative chamber can behave versus how it actually does. Naomi, any surprises in who voted which way?
For me, no surprises, but that's because I was following it relatively closely and keeping a track of who was where on the issue. But I do think it was very interesting when you looked at portfolio holders and how they voted. So within Wes Streeting's team, obviously he pretty famously was not in favour of the bill, but pretty much everybody else that I could see in his team was. So people like Stephen Kinnock and others that have got the social care brief. And given that social care and palliative care came up on both sides of the debate so many times, I thought it was very interesting that there is division within them. I actually probably maybe thought a few more Liberal Democrats would vote no than did. I think there were 11 of the 72 that voted no. So you would expect, of course, the majority of them to back it.
Yeah, I'm surprised you would expect any, actually.
Oh, really? You thought no Lib Dem would vote against?
Well, I guess I could kind of see Tim Farron, but I thought most of them would vote. I thought 11 was quite high.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
I have subsequently had a good life, a fulfilling life, a life where I've worked towards ensuring disabled people are valued by our society. But that moment also gave me a glimpse of how I would want to live my death, just as I've lived my life, empowered by choices available to me, living that death with the dignity and respect and having the comfort of knowing that I might have control over that very difficult time. For so often, control is taken away from disabled people in all sorts of circumstances.
How do you feel now that the vote has come and gone? Did you hear any arguments from either side that were new or, I don't know, particularly crisply expressed that made you pause for thought?
I feel very pleased, not because the bill has currently, passed this stage of its process through the legislative machine, but pleased with what you mentioned earlier about the conduct. The turnout on a Friday, most unusual for them to sit then, and it really was a stellar turnout.
Yeah, I think there were about 100 people that didn't get to speak, which is just extraordinary in itself.
And the vast, vast, vast majority of arguments being made were made in both directions in an incredibly respectful way. And it's just made me feel that I want more of this. I don't like the whip system. I understand it, and I understand that for many reasons it has to exist, but surely we could move to a system where we allow more free votes, and that it's not just a done deal going into any motion being debated, any bill being put before Parliament, that if there is a strong parliamentary majority for one party, the government will win in either direction, whether they're for or against whatever's been laid, and off we go. I thought it was wonderful to see politicians doing what we hope they do, which is to be involved in public life because of their strong moral compass and that being guided by their conscience, having listened to the views of their voters, etc., and reaching a decision based on that. And I would hope that we don't expect our politicians to be experts on everything, because they simply can't be. And it's wonderful that we have a parliament where people have had careers in medicine and the law and retail and agriculture or whatever it is that they've done previously, but they cannot be expected to be experts on everything. But I would hope that our politicians are experts on morality and of morality. And we see so little of that with the grubbiness of Westminster politics and the sleaze and scandal that so often grips it, that to see them battling with their issues of conscience in this debate was wonderful to see. And as you say, an example of how it all could be.
As you know, I'm slightly more on the fence than you are on this issue, because I recognize that there are thin end of the wedge arguments which are not a deal breaker, because it's never a definitive thing to say that this might end up going a lot further than we intend or end up getting abused, therefore not do it. You know, the answer to that is to be vigilant and monitor the legislation closely and make sure you keep the language tight on it and take the suggestions that will no doubt come from the Lords about how to make it reflect what you're actually intending to do. So, like I said, I don't think it's definitive, but there were basically a tranche of arguments which I found chimed with me. And if you want to read the sort of perfect version of those, then Hugo Rifkin has written a piece, and I'll drop a link in the notes. And the thrust of it is this, that once the option is there, then, you know, if your condition is traumatic, not just for you, but for the people around you, it then becomes another choice that you have on the matter. It's quite easy, for good intentions and honorable motives, for people in that situation to begin to feel that maybe they don't just have the right to die, maybe they have a duty to die, and sort of stop imposing on the people around them. That once you have that option there, the moment you have a terminal diagnosis, it becomes an active question, will you or won't you? And I found that quite persuasive, but it's a cultural shift that we're asking about. The reason it is persuasive is not legislative. It goes back to a theme that I've brought up on this show so many times, Naomi, which is how we treat older people, how we treat illness, how we treat incapacity, how we treat disability. Those are the cultural shifts that we need to make for a host of other reasons aside from this. Those are the cultural norms that feed into this anxiety. Part of what was wonderful about that debate was that everyone brought their own emotional baggage in a way to it, the conversations they've had, the situations they've been in with their family and their friends, and spoke quite openly and vulnerably as human beings.
I don't want to trigger listeners, so let's not go over the gruesome detail of anything, particularly on a Sunday morning. People can go back and watch the debate if they want to, but many testimonies from constituents of the MPs or from the MPs' own personal experiences themselves of the times when palliative care, even when it's available and good and not under the immense pressure that it is now within the NHS, just simply can't. You know, medicine does have its limits, and there are times when we simply cannot ease the suffering and lack of dignity for people at the end of their life.
And my own history is a complicated one, because I have seen one parent die from pancreatic cancer, which was just immensely painful. And I have no doubt that had he had the option, and this is with the best palliative care imaginable. I also lost a mother to Alzheimer's, to dementia, who had expressed a wish many, many, many times during her life, because she had to look after a parent of hers and a parent-in-law of hers with dementia. And many, many times she has said that if this happens to me, I want you to put me in a home and forget about me. I don't want to put this on you in any way. But once she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she changed her mind completely. She wanted to be in her home. She wanted to be with her family. And she ended up having what we would all idealize as a very good death, having seen family and in her sleep. And so I have a really complicated emotional relationship with the thing. I can see both sides of the argument, but only one side of the argument prevents people from doing something that is completely within their autonomous sphere and which they want to do. I think that we should take this energy and put it into improving palliative care, into awareness campaigns, into that cultural shift that does not value people or devalue people on the basis of their age or their capacity.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the palliative care point has come up so many times, and from palliative care doctors in particular, who quite rightly highlight the failure to fund it properly and the limitations that we currently have with it. And it's because of the state of palliative care that I'm terrified of not having that choice at the end of my life. You know, knowing what I know about the state of palliative care makes me definitely, hope that I can avoid and painful death and all the rest of it. But also being mindful of the fact that even when palliative care is very, very good, there are occasions where it simply cannot reach the areas of your body that are in pain. So I agree wholeheartedly with you. These ought not be binary issues. We must improve care, palliative care, social care, and the NHS completely. And of course, Alex, there are lots of countries that have better end-of-life care than we currently have here in the UK that also have assisted dying. You've got places like Switzerland, other European countries, I think Netherlands and Spain. And then here in the UK and British Isles and sort of closer to home, other legislatures are progressing other assisted dying laws. I think Scotland at the moment is going through consultation on it. You've got the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. And in fact, some of their bills are a bit different to ours. They have different thresholds for how many months you may have left and whether it can cover chronic rather than just terminal diagnosis. So we're not alone in the UK in progressing this. Just to say that I don't dismiss the arguments against it at all for 1 second. And I agree that the next stages of the bill are critically important to getting it right.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Louise Haigh made history when she was appointed to the cabinet because she was the youngest ever woman to be appointed to a cabinet post. But she has now done another first, becoming the first of the current cabinet to resign following revelations that she pleaded guilty to a fraud offence in 2013. Alex, for listeners that maybe have been following other news in the last 24 hours, could you just recap for us what that offence is, who knew about it, and why now it's come to light and forced her resignation?
So basically, a decade ago, before Louise Haigh was a politician, she worked for a company. She had a company mobile phone. She was mugged and reported several things stolen, including her company phone. Sometime later, I think a few weeks later, she actually found the phone in her house and realized that it hadn't been nicked. And when she switched it on, basically that alerted the system to which this phone had been reported stolen, which triggered a police inquiry. She was called in to give an interview. Her lawyer advised her to make no comment, which she now says was a mistake, but what does she know? She just did what her lawyer told her. And then she appeared in front of a court charged with a relatively minor fraud offence, and again was advised by her lawyer to plead guilty, which she did, and in return she received the smallest penalty going, which was a discharge, basically. This was something that she had told the Labour Party when she became a candidate for them, told the leadership when she first became a shadow minister. So everyone knew about it. It's not something that she kept hidden. But basically it was revived when the press found out about it. The way it was reported, of course, was utterly ridiculous, just like everything else. I mean, I heard someone announced the story on the BBC, not Sky, in the headlines with the following sentence: Louise Haigh resigns as Transport Secretary after pleading guilty for fraud. And it's like, how the fuck? I mean, how is that an accurate representation of what's happened here?
Yeah.
It's, you know, anyone listening to that will think that she did something dodgy, like while she was Transport Secretary, pleaded guilty to it and had to go. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so the story came out.
She must have been really young in 2013.
She was, I think, 24.
I'm not condoning.
Well, there's nothing to
Right.
condone. It was a
Right.
cock-up. As I understand her side of the thing, it was a cock-up. And her lawyer probably said, look, this will go easier on you if you just plead guilty. You've got no previous record. At that point, she wouldn't have been thinking, oh, in 10 years, I might be in a cabinet.
In MP,
It was the route of least resistance.
And also, she wouldn't have benefited commercially if it was a work phone and the work phone was stolen. Work would have claimed against their insurance for the value of the phone. It's not like she's, you know, gone down the market and sold it and pretended she had it nicked.
Basically, Tories briefing against her are saying that she did it so she could get a newer phone from work.
Right.
You know, they're saying that was the benefit she had in mind. Anyway, listen, the whole thing is nonsense, basically. The conviction was spent. I think it opens a very serious conversation that we need to have about spent convictions from 10 years ago and whether someone who has basically done the equivalent of their time, you know, whatever the judgment was, they've discharged that duty and then the conviction has been spent. Is that still a relevant factor?
And I assume most of the Tories briefing against her are the same ones that defended Johnson and Sunak.
You will not believe it, Naomi.
I will.
Okay, so Boris Johnson does a piece for the Daily Mail that comes out on a Saturday.
I try not to read it, but I am familiar with his work.
Well, I'm going to read you the title of his piece today. Starmer picked a fraudster for his cabinet because he's fraudster in chief, and he knows in his heart that the whole government is a fraud. From Boris fucking Johnson. I mean, genuinely, you could not make this level of brass neck. You couldn't make it up. Johnson, sacked 3 times for lying from most prominent jobs, including as Prime Minister. Johnson, who didn't declare a holiday and didn't declare the redecoration of his flat until he was caught and then had to go back and claim it was a loan or whatever. Johnson.
Going for politicians over very minor indiscretions is going to put people off throwing their hat in the ring to become parliamentarians. Now, there is a case to be made for that being good. We only want those with, you know, very high levels of probity in post, etc. But if you are a left-leaning, progressive kind of person thinking about going into politics, knowing that the stakes for you are so much higher and the threshold of being held to account is far higher than it would be for, as we've explained, Johnson and his cronies.
Or, you know, the reform guy. A journalist asked Nigel Farage, what do you think about the fact that he's got a conviction for a violent offence, for kicking his girlfriend repeatedly while she was on the floor? And Nigel Farage's response was, I've got 1 million TikTok followers, so I'm going to go to lunch now. I don't have to answer your questions.
Do you think James Murdoch would not go through this new vetting system?
You can have your fun at Sky News. We've got 100,000 members. I've got 1 million followers on TikTok. You've had your fun. I'm off for lunch. Thank you.
But I do have some guilt around this. And I often talk to friends of mine who are highly political. I would even put Luke Trill in this camp, who often talk about the political system, what's right with it, what's wrong with it, but without throwing our own hat in the ring to do it. Now, I did stand a long, long time ago in a totally unwinnable seat, so I was only doing it to be a paper candidate. But I've never seriously thrown my hat in the ring, and I don't think I will. in no small part, what puts us all off is the intrusion into your life, the surrender you have to make on behalf of yourself and your family in terms of privacy. And coupled with the fact that I think it is now seen to be a pretty grubby profession in the eyes of many voters, high levels of distrust in anyone calling themselves a politician. So why would we want to do it? But can we criticize the current crop of politicians when, we aren't ourselves prepared to throw our hat in the ring? And I do worry that things like this are just going to compound the quality of people going into politics as being poor, because why do sort of sensible, kind people opt for that lifestyle choice and career choice when the scrutiny levels are just unbelievably high now, particularly for those who are left-leaning?
There are a lot of sort of, mini conspiracies and theories going around that someone briefed against Louise Haigh because she got in trouble over the P&O stuff or whatever, or that she's on the left of the party, and so they were looking to get her out and all of that. But my understanding was that this was her decision. It happened very, very quickly. The story came out on the evening of Thursday, and she was gone by the morning of Friday, like 7:00 in the morning. What I can say is that this is what used to happen. And actually, in that way, I'm very grateful for the change of government and for Louise Haigh, because this is what used to happen. I cast my mind back and hypothesize about the weeks and months of there's nothing to see here. This is a Westminster Village story. And we've started an investigation. It would be unfair to comment until the investigation has made its conclusion. And, let's draw a line under it. We're looking to the future. Those are not the issues that matter to British people. All of that shit going on for months. And I am quite grateful that basically Louise has seen it. We all get that it's a really minor thing, but she understands that it could be made quite a major thing in the news for weeks and weeks to come and put her colleagues in a difficult position and distract from what the government is trying to do. And she's doing what people used to do. She's gone very quickly, and she'll probably be back in a year. The party machine will appreciate that she took one for the team, essentially. She didn't have to resign. There's no rational construction of this that says she had to go, and yet that is the claim that would be made on the front page of the Mail and the Express. Be a Kay Burley jamboree every morning on Sky News. Dan Hodges would be doing day 32 of Louise Haigh not going, and all of that shit. So knowing that that will happen, it's just easier to nip it in the bud and go.
Well, let's talk about her successor, Heidi Alexander, who, of course, takes up the transport brief, having been deputy mayor for transport in London under Sadiq Khan, previously an MP in Lewisham, now an MP in Swindon. We know Heidi. She's been on podcasts with us in the past. And Heidi, if you're listening, you're welcome anytime. How do you feel about her credentials for the role? I'm sure we'll all agree she sounds like a pretty damn good choice by Starmer.
Solid media performer. Her credentials are actually in this area. I think her degree was in geography, but then she did a thing like on urban planning. And like I said, together with the fact that she held a transport brief for London for the last few years, there will be some criticism because, she was the first member of Corbyn's cabinet to resign.
Cabinet.
Corbyn's shadow cabinet. And so I think a lot of people will see her as on the centre or the right of the Labour Party. And Lou was someone who was seen very much on the left of the party.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Lou is seen as being soft left.
But you do understand my point. For those looking at the balance of the cabinet and trying to assess whether Starmer is giving a fair seat at the table to the left of the Labour Party, this will not seem like a like-for-like replacement.
All I can say is that I am now even more hopeful that we might get the Bakerloo line extension down the Old Kent Road, given how much she knows the benefit of that, having held the Deputy Mayor transport brief.
The other thing to say is that the nationalization of rail bill got royal assent on Wednesday, actually. It became an act. So she really got a lot done in 5 months, more than at least 2 previous administrations have done for transport. So I am certain that she will be back in a prominent role after a bit of time has passed. President Volodymyr Zelensky has given a long and wide-ranging interview to Sky News, which is notable, I think, for several reasons. Asked whether he would accept NATO membership, but only for the territory that Kyiv currently holds, the Ukrainian president did not reject the notion out of hand. He said that if the parts of Ukraine under his control were to be taken under the NATO umbrella, it might stop the hot phase of the war. He also said that the invitation would have to extend to all of the Ukrainian territory. It's just we would then enter a process of negotiation for them to get the rest of the territory back, basically.
Yes, it could be possible, but no one offered. But the invitation must be given to Ukraine within its internationally recognized border. You can't give invitation to just one part of a country. Why? Because thus you would recognize that Ukraine is only that territory of Ukraine and the other one is Russia. So legally, by law, we have no right to recognize the occupied territory as territory of Russia. And here we must not make any mistake. But if we want to stop the hot stage of the war, we should take under NATO umbrella the territory of Ukraine that we have under our control. That's what we need to do fast. And then Ukraine can get back the other part of its territory diplomatically.
This is the first time Zelensky has entertained even the idea of giving up any territory, with caveats. Is this a sign of weakness? Is it weariness? Is it realpolitik ahead of a Trump White House? Or is it the glimmer of an off-ramp for Putin, for whom, let us remember, despite Ukraine being currently on the back foot, this war is also going extremely badly?
Look, these are the right questions.
We just don't have any answers.
Alex, they are. I maintain my position from last weekend before, all the times that we talked about this, that the two sides are still incredibly far apart. Biden would certainly not countenance Ukraine joining NATO at the moment, because, of course, once you are a member of NATO, all other NATO countries have an obligation and a duty to defend. So it would escalate. It could easily bring the West into the Russian-Ukraine war with some, real gusto, rather than the situation that we've got at the moment, where we're sort of arming them a bit. And clearly, this is being talked about by Zelensky from a position of weakness, and he is, of course, showing his hand. But Russia's not going to agree to it either. Also, there is a constitutional issue for Zelensky. The constitution of Ukraine says that he cannot give away territory. So even if we were in a situation where a Trump administration feels it could broker this as palatable to them and to Putin, Zelensky himself would have to do major constitutional reform in order to be seen as not breaking the law within his own country of ceding some territory. You're right, you're dead right to make the point about how poorly the war is going for Russia at the moment, and the ruble did more things this week, and last week we'd sort of seen it move against the yuan, the Chinese yuan, quite drastically, which of course is terrible for Russia because of the amount of trade they are now reliant on doing with China. So the two sides, I think, remain very, very far apart. This clearly was an interview where Zelensky was showing the vulnerability of Ukraine, for sure. But I think he knows what he was doing, and what he was saying is so unlikely to happen that it's making the point that
I'm the reasonable one.
Yeah, if you really want me to sue for peace, then my terms are ones you're not going to be able to live with. So let's crack on with the war, huh?
I think what Zelensky is doing is he is effectively harking back to the Budapest Memorandum. He is reminding the West that Russia can't be trusted. Because just, very brief history lesson, Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was considerable. It would have made it the third largest nuclear power at the time, and they did so on the basis of a series of bilateral agreements that said the US, the UK, and Russia guaranteed Ukraine's independence and its territorial integrity. And if anyone should breach that, they would step in to protect it. And in the end, it was actually Russia, one of the guarantors of that integrity, that ended up breaching it. And really, post-Crimea, with the exception of some very, very weak economic sanctions, the UK and the US did diddly squat. So they're going back to that and saying, look, you want us to do a deal with Russia. I get that. What guarantees do I have they're not going to do a deal and then invade some more of our territory anyway? His red line is that he must have a form of guarantee of the remaining territorial integrity of Ukraine before he entertains any notion. And this is just a device for explaining how that might happen, right?
Yeah.
I think both the constitutional and NATO things, if that is the will of the parties involved, a fudge will be found. We know this, right? There's a lot of moving parts there. It's very difficult to know exactly what's going on. And Syria, in the last couple of days, that's a really big complication, right?
Well, it is. Now, we're not going to get into the detail of what is happening there because it is incredibly complicated and there are so many actors, both within Syria's borders and its various allied groups in and around backing different factions of that. But of course, Assad and Putin are allied. Syria, for a very long time now, has had stable front lines. At the time of recording, rebels have now taken some quite big chunks out of Aleppo, I believe. So it is very interesting why now. There are, of course, other distractions happening in the region, notably Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon. But given the allied nature of Syria and Russia, it is interesting, and I do wonder if it is a sign of Russian weakness that the rebels felt that they could do this.
Oh, they were asleep at the wheel, for sure. And they took most of Aleppo because they just didn't have sufficient forces there. And then they basically bombed a lot of the rebel positions, so they went in by air. But here's a question. What side are we on? Like UK, US? This is Russia fighting Al-Qaeda. Because there was a time when we were definitely against Syria and Russia, and there was a time when we were definitely against Al-Qaeda. Do you know what I mean? So it is a complicating thing that impinges on all the other various conflicts that are going on. It will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
And finally today, Alex, we're going to go over the Irish Sea because counting has begun following Ireland's general election. The exit poll showed Sinn Féin on 21.1% of the vote, just ahead of Fine Gael on 21% and Fianna Fáil on 19.5%. There is a 1.4% error margin in that exit poll. And that means that at the time of recording, it is likely that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will make up another coalition government. They have a proportionate system. They'll be counting the votes over the next couple of days. And by the time the show goes out, you'll probably know the seat tally and therefore who is likely to take the role of Taoiseach. So instead of being hideously out of date, Alex, let's focus on what won't change between us recording and when people are going to listen to this. And that, of course, is a coalition of some sort is inevitable on those vote shares. Let's talk about Sinn Féin, because we did do a deep dive on their woes and the many scandals north and south of Ireland that they've been battling, scandal after scandal, falling poll ratings, to then really make quite an extraordinary comeback come polling day. Would you agree that, that is quite the turnaround?
I wouldn't. Sorry, I wouldn't, I don't think. Yes, if you look at the very short term, there's a little bump up in the polls. So whereas they were at sort of 18% when the election was called, it looks as if they might end up on 21, 22. But, they've had sustained periods during this parliament when and I mean sustained years, where they were in the mid-30s. So in the grand scheme of things, this isn't some magnificent rally. It is a small little bump. As I understand it from friends in Ireland, there is a similar phenomenon to what's happening with Labour here, basically, which is that the left are beginning to not really see Labour as a party of the left. In fact, it's happening all over the world. Centre-left parties are seen as establishment, and people who want more radical, more socialist solutions are looking elsewhere. And in Ireland, that party is Sinn Féin. So I think there is a rump of votes. They would go for Sinn Féin for lack of a proper left-wing alternative anyway. And I would suspect that the two centre-right and centre-left parties being in coalition only affirms that belief that Sinn Féin is the only proper leftist party in Ireland. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think they now have an exceptionally strong base below which it's very difficult to drop.
And it is worth pointing out that this vote share is lower than the vote share Sinn Féin got at the last election.
Yeah, they may not end up first, for instance.
Indeed, and they got 37 seats on 24.5% of the vote last time. Fianna Fáil was the largest party. They got 38 seats on 22.2%. It's the way that the votes turn into distributed seats across the country that is the thing to look at. And it can take weeks to get the coalition approved. I think it took nearly 5 months last time round, but that was probably a COVID pandemic negotiation impact rather than what we'll see this time round, but it could take quite a long time. And the election campaign wasn't totally without scandalous moments. Did you see Fine Gael's popularity slumping a little bit when it was caught on camera? It was a bit of a Gordon Brown moment, but much worse, in my opinion, when Harris dismissed a voter's concern about disability care. He gets accosted in a supermarket by a woman saying there was nothing in the budget for carers and for those that look after the disabled. You're neglecting us. And he just goes, that's not true. That's not true, in quite a dismissive way.
Hello. How are you? Very nice to see you. How are you? Good to see you.
Can I ask you a question?
You can, yeah.
We fought for money. Yeah, we were. We were ignored.
No, that's true.
Yes, we were.
No,
yes, we were.
Okay, we can take it.
And the disability sector is a joke. You've done nothing for us. Our people are suffering. I'm very passionate about my job.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about disability too.
But there's been no mention in the budget whatsoever. You ignored them. You ignored the carers.
That's not true to say that.
Yes, you do. It has not been mentioned. Keep shaking hands, pretend you're a good man. You're not a good man.
Okay, well, if you don't think I'm a good man.
Because you don't care about those people.
So that was kind of like the standout moment. Oh, could this see a massive Sinn Féin victory if he's really cocked it up? And remember, of course, Alex, the story that broke, I think, early October, that there is an Irish politician, a sitting Irish politician, allegedly recruited as an agent by Russian intelligence. And we've never known who it is. So the Sunday Times reported that Russian intelligence used a honey trap to recruit the politician in a story as old as time. And this was during the Brexit talks, with one of the aims being to undermine relations between Britain, Ireland and the EU. And we still don't know who it is. And they're not releasing it because it could be a security concern. And so what it's meant is that every time candidates and politicians have been interviewed on the campaign trail, one of the questions they've been asked is, and are you a Russian asset?
you know, sometimes when I go through borders, because for some reason border people think I'm lying about being Greek, they try to catch me out by asking me something in Greek, because I think they learn like a few phrases from each language, which is hilarious because, of course, I answer them in Greek, but they have no idea what I tell them. But maybe journalists could do that, just spring a question on them in Russian and see if they go, duh, oh no. And that's it for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School.
These really are my favourite shows. And you told me, having squirreled in the back end of our analytics, that they often get the most number of listens and downloads. And so I'd love to know from everyone tuning in, is that because you have more time on a Sunday, or because you prefer the format? I'm all ears, so let us know on Blue Sky. You can find us at Quiet Riot Pod, or by emailing into quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for letting us into your space. Thank you for tuning in. We'll speak next week.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads, with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou, and produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Alex is going to be doing the first edit.
What a babe.
He will be listening to this conversation now, of course. So I must be careful what I say. That Welsh wanker.